Alrighty, Benny Kiko here. Today we're going to be taking apart the Vissles V84 and lubing the stabilizers and also doing the Holee mod on them. When I reviewed this keyboard for the first time, the keys all sounded really good, but the stabilizers did need a little work, so that's why we're getting back to it today. If you want to check out the video, the link will be down in the description below. So without further ado, let's get into the sound test. So as you can tell, they're not perfect, but they could use a little work, and that's what we'll be doing today. The first thing you'll need is a pair of scissors to cut the band-aids for the Holee mod. The next thing you'll need is a brush to apply the lube to the stabilizers. I'm going to use one of these pronged claws to grab onto the switches. Now the next thing you're going to need is a switch puller, and this is only going to be if you have a hot swappable keyboard. The Vissles V84 is one, and what that means is you can take out these switches without having to solder them and desolder them to get them in and out. The next thing you're going to need is a pair of tweezers, just for a whole bunch of different things. An X-Acto knife will be helpful throughout the process as well. Of course, you'll need the band-aids for the Holee mod. I chose Star Wars, of course, why wouldn't I? A keycap puller to take out the keycaps. Last but not least, you need your lube. I'm using Krytox 205 grade 0, just because that's the only one I have. But with all that being done, we can go ahead and get into the actual mod itself. Let me just take these out of the way real quick. Cool little quick edit. Now the first thing you're going to want to do is remove all of the keycaps with the stabilizer, none of them. For this board, it's going to be the shift, the backspace, the enter, and the space bar. And one piece of advice that I'd also do is remove the keycaps that are physically above the switches so you can get the keycap puller in there easier. Once you have those removed, you can go ahead and take out the switches. Pretty self-explanatory. Any key that has a stabilizer, you're just going to go over and pull the switch out. And you'll see that removing those top keys actually allows you to get in there a little easier than having them in. And sometimes you'll see that the switches are a little harder to pull out, so you might need to give it a little strength. After the switches are out, you can go ahead and begin to remove the stabilizers. Now, the Vissles V84 has a rim. You're going to want to pop off this rim. I should have actually done that before, but regardless, you can go ahead and get into the stabilizers now. What you want to do is grab your tweezers and push down on these little prongs and just pull up and they'll come right out. Super simple process, and they don't really give any headaches. And from there, once both of the housings are up, you can go ahead and grab them and remove it out by pulling out the bar as well. And I'll grab that little hair right there, and you're good. So essentially do this process with the other three stabilizers. They're going to be exactly the same, except the bar, instead of pulling out from the top, they'll pull out from the bottom. Once you have all of these stabilizers ready, you can go ahead and line them up. If you give them a look, they already have pre-lube on them. However, when I get in and do the Holee mod, I don't want any lube in there. So I'm going to have to get in and wipe all of that off and make sure it's all clean, and then we'll provide a most likely higher grade lube with the Krytox. Now, to remove the stabilizer bar from the housing, all you're going to have to do is grab the bar and pull it towards the housing itself. It should just pop out, and then you just slide it out from there, and the inserts will be able to come out as well from the bottom. So you can see that they just kind of push out, and then there you go. The housing is on the left, the insert is on the right, and then you have the bar down there with the other housing still attached. Do the same thing, pull the bar towards, you'll hear a click, and then it just slides out easy, and then the insert will just drop out like that. Once you have removed all the bars from the housing and inserts, you can go ahead and clean them off. I would suggest by putting them in a bowl of dish soap. This will allow the lube to come off. However, it won't come off on its own, so you'll have to give it a little wash. Here I go ahead and give it a little swirl first to get them all wet, and then I begin to go at them with a toothbrush. Just a disclaimer, this is not the toothbrush I use for my mouth. We don't want to ruin the switches, right? With that little disclaimer out of the way, we can go ahead and start washing the stabilizer bars. Just give them a nice little scrub and rub, and they should be good. Then you can move on to the housings. Now when you get to the housings and the inserts, you have to be a little more careful because there's going to be lube in all the different crevices. Make sure you're careful and you get in and you scrub them all through because you don't want to leave any excess lube. It could make your life a little bit harder than it needs to be. Go ahead and wash them off and do it a couple times. Just go back and forth and just make sure all the lube is completely out. This is a little bit of a longer process, so just keep that in mind. After you've finished up getting off all the lube, just set them aside and then put them in a bowl of clean water. This will allow you to wash off any excess soap and just make sure that they're completely clean. After that, you're going to want to put them on a dry towel and let them sit there for quite a while. You don't want any moisture at all. Having no moisture is really important. Alright, so one thing that I didn't realize is that these inserts actually have these little prong standoffs. They allow for a clacky feel if they're removed compared to a mushy feel when they're left on. And essentially there's 4 prongs in total, but 2 of them will be raised in an L shape, and those are the ones that you're going to want to cut off. If you try and place it flat down on the table, you'll see that the raised ones stop it from being flush with the table. So those are the ones that you'll cut off. Now, I wasn't prepared for this, so I didn't have the proper flush cutters. However, I realized that I did have some toenail clippers that were straight, and you can go ahead and use those to go in and place them around the prong. Be very careful that you don't snip too much. And from there, you're able to just carefully clip them off. Just make sure you're very careful about where you're placing the end of the toenail clippers. And with that, you should have a pretty flush bottom. If it's not, just grab your X-Acto knife and go over it a little bit. And from there, you can remove any excess plastic. At the end, they will look just like this with none of the raised prongs on the bottom and just the 2 essential ones that you need. Hopefully this adds a better clacky feel and less of a mush. Now from there, we can go ahead and move on to the Holee Mod. I highly suggest that before you do the Holee Mod, you watch Hamaji Neo's video on it. It's very thorough and it has much better camera quality than mine, and it will give you a much better idea of what you need to do. I'll go ahead and put that link down below. This is the step in the process where you're going to need your Star Wars band-aids. I put a credit card here as well, but you're not actually going to need that. I just use it for my X-Acto knife, just so I don't cut up my desk. The first thing you're going to want to do is remove the rounded part of the band-aid if it has a rounded part. This is going to allow for even pieces that you can put inside of your stabilizers. From there, you're going to cut a very small piece, and you're going to want to make sure that it lines up properly with the holes in your inserts. So if you look at the inserts, there's going to be 3 holes. On one side, there will be 1 big hole, and on the other side, there will be 2 small holes. What you're going to do is grab the band-aid and weave it through the top side of the insert. The way that we're looking at it right now is technically the bottom, but we'll call it the top just for this example's sake. And you're going to weave it through the top and grab the other side with your finger. You can't really see it right now, I'm sorry, I'm blocking a little bit, but grab it through the other side and then just pull the tweezers off and then pull it down so it gets a nice stick onto there. Next, you're going to want to cut off a little excess since it's going to wrap underneath, and then just grab the tweezers and push them inside like that. And you'll notice that it creates a little wrapping around the switch. And from there, just go ahead and push it down and make sure it's all even and sticking. Now, this process does take a little long. The first one took me about 10 minutes to get the hang of, but after that, I could do one in about 1 to 2 minutes. But please, again, go watch Hamaji Neo's video down in the description to get the full details on how to do this mod properly with very good imagery. After about 20-30 minutes, this is what they looked like, and they came out actually pretty nice. You can see the gray from the Star Wars Band-Aid sitting right there. From there, we can move on to my favorite part, which is the lubing. Pretty self-explanatory. All you're going to do is grab some lube, just a small amount, and you're going to coat the inside of the housing first. You don't want your lube to be very white and visible. You just want a gloss going around the entire housing. And once that's all finished up, you can go ahead and move on to the switch insert itself. And I didn't even add too much extra lube on here. I just used the excess that was on the paintbrush already and went ahead and put it on the left and the right side. And after doing both sides of the insert, you're pretty much done with the lubing process. You just need to do it with all the other switches. I believe there's going to be 7 more. And just so you guys can see, you're going to want to put the insert back inside of the housing. There's going to be an opening on one side, and then the part of the insert with the 2 holes essentially are going to go together. So I had to switch hands real quick. And so here you can see the 2-sided insert goes flush into the side of the housing that has the open hole where the stabilizer bar goes. From there, once you finish lubing the stabilizer housings and inserts, you can move on to the bars. This process is pretty easy. All you're going to do is get a nice thick coat of lube, you're going to place it on the shorter side of the bars. And essentially you want to be able to see the lube and have a nice thick coating all the way up the short side, and also you're going to want to put it a little bit past the bar itself, past the right angle. This will allow for all points of contact on the stabilizer to be lubed. By the end of it, you should have a little L shape of lube and you'll be able to visibly see it. Once that's finished up, go ahead and grab your stabilizer housings. Now this part will take a little bit of precision, and it was a little bit hard for me to see past the camera, but essentially you will insert it into the bottom hole of the two-sided hole insert, and it'll just slide in. It might take a little wiggling back and forth since we now have a band-aid in there, but once it slides in, you'll know it for sure because it'll just fit right in, and then you can clip it back into the stabilizer housing itself, and you'll notice it's correct if you wiggle the stabilizer bar and it moves up and down. From there, I'll show you one more example of the other side. I tried to get a good shot where you could see through, but it doesn't really work. But again, once the bar goes into the insert, just give it a little wiggle back and forth and you'll know it's in nicely, and then you can go ahead and clip it in. And from there, that's all it's going to take to put together the stabilizers. Just make sure you do that for the other 4 stabilizers and you'll be all good. And just like that, the modding of the stabilizers is done. It's easier said than done. It takes about 1 to 3 hours depending on the speed and precision that you do things. But from there, you can go ahead and place them back into the board. For the space bar, you're going to want to grab the bar, place the bar into the long slot, and then just push down the stabilizers and give them a little wiggle to make sure that they're all secure. And then the stabilizers for the modifier keys are going to be the opposite. The bar is going to go in facing downward. And just like with the space bar, once they're in, just give them a little wiggle to make sure they're in securely. Now, since this keyboard is hot swappable, we can just pop our switches back in, which is going to be really helpful. If you have a keyboard that needs desoldering, you're going to have to watch a different tutorial on how to do that. So after popping the switches in, you can go ahead and apply your keycaps, and just like that, the process is going to be done. I really did enjoy this. It was nice and relaxing. I literally just listened to a live stream for like 3 hours while I did this. And I gotta say, I'm really fond of the lubing process itself. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the sound test. All right, I want to do this live to see if the last 3 to 4 hours of work that I put into these stabilizers actually was worth it. I'm not too sure because I know the stabilizers are not as high quality as some that you can buy aftermarket, and they're not screw-in, they're just a clip-in, so that can affect how they sound. But here goes nothing. I hope they sound great. I don't know. That's not bad. That one's pretty nice. You know, the modifier keys, the shift, the enter, and the backspace aren't bad. The spacebar doesn't sound how good I want it to sound, honestly. That little rattle in there. Now, just some final thoughts. Honestly, although it was a really fun learning process, I didn't really get the results that I wanted, and I think it's just because of this type of stabilizers that come with this board. They're not screw-in, so they have a little more rattle, but honestly, it's nothing too bad. I personally don't see a huge difference in this spacebar, but like I said, the modifier keys do actually sound a bit better, so that was worth it in my opinion. But for the spacebar, maybe I didn't do it completely perfect. It doesn't sound as tight as I'd like it to sound. In the end, it's really just up to you if you want to modify them or not. Maybe you could try some different modding techniques. But with that being said, it's essentially up to you if you want to do it or not. I think it was a great learning experience, and now I can apply this to any future boards that I decide to build, and I can do it with even better precision. But in the end, I had a great time, and I'm glad I did it. And just like that, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you have any questions, please leave them down below. I'm going to be leaving links to my tools and Hamaji Neo's video down in the description, along with my review of this board in the first place. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time.